We have been told for years that humanoid robots were coming, but the version that was coming in most people's heads was something mechanical and obviously artificial, a thing you could clearly identify as a machine. What is actually arriving looks nothing like it. Right now, robots are selling cars in dealerships across China. There are android museum guides that switch to languages mid-conversation and remember your name if you come back. There are synthetic faces that can predict your smile before it fully forms and mirrors it back at you in real time. There are companies building artificial bodies modeled on actual human anatomy, with muscles and tendons instead of motors and joints. And Meta is reportedly working on a photorealistic digital version of Mark Zuckerberg, trained on his voice and mannerisms so that employees can interact with something that sounds and looks like him even when he's not there. I keep thinking about that last one because of how casually it fits into the rest of the story. Industrial robots have been doing the heavy lifting, literally, for decades. They weld, assemble, and sort at speeds no human can match. That part of robotics is, well, old news. The hard part, the part that the industry has been quietly grinding away at, is putting a machine in front of a real person and making that person feel at ease. Reuters got access to the EX robot factory in Dalian, China, back in mid-2024, and the footage made rounds for a reason. It looked like a workshop where someone was assembling artificial people. Silicone faces on table, unfinished limbs, android heads blinking and tracking movement and copying facial expressions. One clip showed a worker smiling and sticking out her tongue, and the robot opposite her did it back, driven by small motors running just under synthetic skin. The factory's founder has been saying for years that emotional communication is what the real value of humanoid robots lies, not housework, not manufacturing. The robots they build have already shown up in Chinese museums as historical figures and multilingual guides, placed specifically in environments where a visitor expects some warmth and personality from whoever is explaining things. The labor argument gets all the attention, but what some of these companies are actually building is something you could describe as a social machine, something designed specifically to lower your guard. The expression work kept advancing into 2025 and early 2026. A research roboticist shared footage of a humanoid face with a level of micro-expression and environmental awareness that made people stop scrolling. A head form had already been drawing attention with their L51, a humanoid face system built around genuine social reactivity. And then there is Emo. 26 actuators under silicon skin, cameras in the pupils, and software that can detect the muscle shifts in your face that precede a smile, hundreds of milliseconds before the smile actually arrives, and match it. Think about what that means in practice. The machine is not reacting to your smile, it's anticipating it. The timing feels natural because it's calibrated to be natural. That is a very different thing from a robot that just moves its face when you speak to it. Now, there has always been a gap what a humanoid face could do and what the rest of the body could do. You could put together a convincing head, and the moment it needed to move through a room, the illusion collapsed. The body gave it away every time. That gap is genuinely narrowing now, and the company that represents this most interestingly to me is Clone Robotics. They're based in Poland, and their approach is fundamentally different from most humanoid robotics projects. Instead of engineering motion through electric motors at each joint, they set out to reverse engineer the human body at a structural level. Bones, tendons, and muscles that work through pressure and contraction rather than rotation. The founder traced this back to actual studying real human anatomy, spending time with cadavers and trying to understand what would it take to replicate the mechanical logic underneath our skin. By early 2025, they had shown Protoclone V1, a full-body humanoid with something in the range of 1,000 artificial muscles and hundreds of sensors distributed throughout it. The footage of it starting to move went around partly because of what it was not. It was not a slick or polished exhibition. It looked raw, almost biological. And then earlier this year, they presented a roadmap with timelines that felt almost aggressive. Near surgical grade precision by end of 2026, walking by 2027, a commercial product by 2028 priced at under $20,000. That price number is the one worth sitting with, because if the cost of a synthetic humanoid body drops below what it costs to employ a person in a service role for a year, the economic conversation changes completely and very quickly. On the material science side, researchers at Seoul National University put out work in April 2026 on a new kind of artificial muscle that can reorganize its internal structure while it's operating. It can be reshaped with heat or magnetic fields, it can repair itself after damage, and it showed roughly 91 performance recovery throughout repeated reuse cycles. Most soft robotic systems are designed for one specific motion. This material is not. The broader point is that the underlying components of synthetic bodies are becoming more flexible, more durable, and more human-like in how they function under stress. Now, there's a version of a humanoid robot that is impressive but fundamentally forgettable, and it is the version that treats every conversation like the first one. It responds, it answers, it moves correctly, and then it resets. That version does not create attachment, it just performs. The version that actually changes things is the one that picks up where it left off. That distinction between a machine that reacts and one that remembers is probably the most important line in this whole story. Realbotix, a Las Vegas-based robotics company, delivered a humanoid robot to Ericsson in April 2026 that runs their Vinci system. Vinci is a patented AI vision setup that lives inside the robot's eyes. Cameras in the pupils feed real-time environmental data back to the system where the robot maintains eye contact. That means that it can recognize someone it has met before, call up what they have talked about before, continue the thread, track emotional signals, read the room, and log everything its structured behavioral data. The CEO of Realbotix described it as bringing visually aware robots into real enterprise settings. The eye contact piece especially. There is a known human tendency to respond very differently to something that meets your gaze versus something that just exists in the room. A camera in the corner feels like monitoring. A robot looking at you feels like presence. When the data collection is dressed up in social signals we are wired to respond to, people stop thinking about it as data collection at all. Now, what is interesting about where things stand right now is that the companies are no longer trying to avoid the uncanny valley. They're trying to cross it. The strategy for years was to keep robots clearly mechanical, so people would just relate to them as tools. The goal now is to get past that dip entirely to the place on the other side where the machine is close enough to human that the brain stops flagging the mismatch and just accepts it. They are coming at it from every single angle at once. Realistic skin, synchronized expressions, bodies that can move softly, eyes that maintain contact, voices that sound natural, and software that makes the interaction feel continuous rather than transactional. Now, something comedian Whitney Cummings said publicly in 2025 has stayed with me. A while back, she had a robot replica made of herself for a Netflix project. She expected it to be a temporary prop, something that would go away after the performance, but it stayed in her house, and years later she talked about still having it and being unable to make herself get rid of it, even knowing the attachment made no logical sense. She described feeling guilt at the thought of disposing it. Now, what I find significant about this is not that it's a strange story, because it isn't. What I find significant is that it is a predictable outcome. Human attachment does not run on logic. It runs on consistent emotional signals, repetition, and presence. A robot does not need consciousness to trigger those things. It just needs to show up regularly and respond in ways that feel warm. Now, consider that the robots being built today are specifically engineered to optimize for exactly those responses. At CES 2026, Lovins presented a product called Emily. Physically, it is a life-sized companion with a silicon body, internal posable structure, and limited but present facial movement. The more important layer is what the software does. Emily is designed to carry on conversations, retain memory of past interactions, shift its personality gradually around the individual user, and remain accessible through an app where the physical product is not in the room. It is not marketed as a product you buy once. It's positioned as an ongoing relationship with a persistent presence, both physical and digital. The company is not exactly shy about the direction they are pointing. The idea is that the bond itself is the product. And once you accept that framing, you start to see it showing up in a lot of other places. Okay, here comes the last thing I want to talk about, and I think it's the one thing that has the furthest reach, and it is also the most quiet one. A robot that is visibly mechanical makes the replacement obvious. People notice it, they react to it, and they debate it. But a synthetic human that looks right, sounds right, and remembers you does something different. It makes the replacement feel like an upgrade. There is a Chinese company that has deployed well over 200 Android units across car dealerships. These androids greet customers, walk them through options, answer questions, pour drinks, and do it all in whatever language the customer speaks. From the customer's side, the experience is smooth and probably pleasant. From the company's side, you have a consistent multilingual data collecting presence that never has a day off and can be running in hundreds of locations simultaneously. The replacement happens without any moment of confrontation. It arrives wrapped in good service. The same logic scales everywhere that trust is built through human interaction. Service, education, healthcare, customer support. A synthetic employee can be copied across locations, updated centrally, made consistent in ways a human workforce cannot be. When that consistency also comes packaged in a face that smiles back at you, the business case stops needing much of an argument. Now, the digital version of this is just as significant. If a CEO can exist as a photorealistic AI trained on years of public statements, interviews, and internal communication, then the boundary between leadership and its simulation start to blur. If a creator can have a version of themselves that keeps engaging their audiences while they sleep, the audience may never notice the gap. So, here is the question that I keep coming back to. If you walked into a dealership and had a great conversation with someone who helped you make a decision you feel good about, and then afterward you found out that the person was actually a synthetic human, would it change anything? Would the experience retroactively feel different? Would you feel deceived? Or would you think, honestly, that it was just a good interaction? Because right now the rules around disclosure are nowhere near keeping pace with the technology. I'm not saying this to be alarmist. I genuinely think a lot of this is, well, it's fascinating. But I think the honest version of that fascination includes sitting with a discomfort of a question that does not have a clean answer yet. The people interacting with these systems deserve to know what they're interacting with. And right now, a lot of them don't.